All right, y'all, we back with part 6. So when we left off, Calvin was telling Detective White and Detective Smith about what happened to him to cause him to be shot and William to be murdered. So both Detective White and Detective Smith are like looking at each other like, is he serious? So basically, Calvin just basically told a story and just put a mass assailant in the spot of Deja, and also said that the mass assailant robbed him for his money. So they talked to him a little while longer. They asked him to replay the scenario a few more times. Detective White then went on to ask, well, why would you go after the assailant? Why wouldn't you just call the police? And Calvin goes on to say that he was just in the heat of the moment, that money that he had been saving up for years, and he just didn't want someone to just come in and take it away from him like that. And it was a bit of panic. So then Detective White asked him where was his wife. And just the thought of hearing Deja's voice kind of sent him into a tailspin. His blood pressure started to go up. He said she wasn't there. That's the only thing that he could say because he really didn't know what else he could say at the time. With that being said, the nurse comes in and she tells them that that's enough for today, and that if they have any more questioning, they would have to come back another day. So when the detectives walk out into the hallway, they both start to try to discuss the case. Right off top, Detective Smith is like, nah, something ain't right about this story. Now, Detective White, he felt like it was more to the story as well, but he was happy that Calvin did not implicate Deja in the story at all. They decided to do some further investigation and then come back on another day to continue to question Calvin. Back at Miss Minnie's house, her and Deja are preparing to go to the train station. Ian walks Sharon. Sharon says to Deja, why are you taking my mama back to New York to put her in your drama? Mama, she made her bed hard. She got to lie in it. She got to face this on her own. She got herself in a situation. I don't see why you going up there. And that's when Miss Minnie had to check her and say, look, this is my child and I'm going to help her. I would do the same for you or any of my other children. So what I need for you to do is run the club while I'm gone, work my books, and stay in your place. Period. Once Miss Minnie and Deja boarded the train, they did do a little talking. Of course, in code, they couldn't say too much because they didn't want anyone around them to hear what they were discussing. But Miss Minnie basically was telling Deja that she has to go in there and be the doting wife. She has to put on this show or this front to make it believable so that she will not be implicated in this murder and shooting. And of course, Deja knows what she has to do. It's just a fact of doing it. She knows that she has to face the music. She knows that this is a chapter in her life that she got to work through so that she can move on to the next one. And she definitely don't want to spend the next chapter of her life in prison. As Calvin lay in the hospital bed, he could only just think about different ways he wanted to get revenge on Deja. That's another reason he didn't tell on her, because he had his own revenge he wanted to serve up on her. He just didn't know what he was going to do yet. And he still had to let the fact sink in that William was gone. That was his partner and best friend. So now that he was gone, it was going to be hard for him to move on with his life. So he didn't know what he was going to do. All he knew that he was in a lot of pain, and he just didn't know where he was going to pick up the pieces. A few hours later, Deja and Miss Minnie arrive at the hospital. They go in, and Deja begins to put on her show. She doesn't know how Calvin is going to react, let alone what he remembers from that night. She rushes into the room. She runs over to him. She grabs his hand as he's sleeping. When Calvin feels his hand being touched, he looks over and opens his eyes. And what does he see? His wife standing there looking down at him. Hate began to fill into his eyes as he looked up at her. And as he looked at her, he could see the hate in her eyes as well. Two people that loved each other for years started to hate each other within a matter of days. Calvin, my love, I'm here, baby. They told me what happened. How could somebody do this to you? Deja said as she caressed his face. Calvin looked right back up at her and began to play right along with her. I don't know, baby. I'm just glad you're here with me. I know that with you by my side, I can get through this. The nurse that came into the room looks back and smiles. It warms her heart to see a loving couple trying to fight through a bad situation. God bless you all, as she walked out of the room. After the nurse walks out of the room, it's Miss Minnie's turn to speak her mind. And believe me, Miss Minnie, she ain't putting on no front. She ain't pulling no punches. She looks dead at Calvin and says, they say if you play with a puppy, it'll lick your mouth. Now you're mad because your wife found out. You made your bed, now you gotta lie in it. You could turn over fast or you can lay there and cry in it. If you try to hurt my daughter again, that's your ass. And Miss Minnie then turns and walks out of the room, y'all. After Miss Minnie walks out of the room, this is the first time that Deja and Calvin will be alone without anybody around. Deja then turns to Calvin and says, I can't believe you. What I saw you doing with William, every time I think about it, it turns my stomach, Calvin. How could you? And that's when Calvin responds, how could you? You tried to take my life, and I'm still sitting here sparing yours. I could have told him what you done, but I'll take care of you in due time. And as soon as Calvin says that, his mother, sister, and brother walk into the room. They had came up that night. They went back to the hotel to change clothes and freshen up. When they see Deja, they are relieved because his wife is here by his side. They know nothing. They greet her and they ask her where she's been. She explains that she went to see her mother and that she got back here as soon as she could. She gives them some time to talk and she walks out into the hallway to check on her mother. Miss Minnie is sitting out in the hallway, but she tells Deja that she's going to go and grab some food from the cafeteria. Deja was about to go back in the room and let them know that she was going to join her mother, but then she saw Detective White walking up the hallway. Both of them were in a bit of shock because Deja didn't get a chance to call him and tell him that she was on her way back into town. When Detective White sees her, he says, wow, you made it back. I'm so happy. She was like, thank you. He said, how's your husband? She said, as well as can be expected. Detective White told her that he just wanted to make sure she was okay. He already had interviewed Calvin. And when he told her that, she was very nervous at first. Her heart started beating really fast. And then he went on to say, he didn't implicate you at all. Deja was like, I know, but I'm glad I'm here to be by his side. At that moment, the doctor walked up and he asked for everyone to come in. So Detective White stays out in the hallway. Deja goes back in the room with Calvin and his family. The doctor looks over the charts, and that's when he breaks the news that Calvin is paralyzed. The trauma from the bullet has inflamed his spinal cord, and there's a good chance that he may or may not walk ever again. He has to go through rehab so that they can see if this inflammation will go down and if he can go back to normal. Tears fill Calvin's eyes as he feels like his life is over. Deja stays quiet, but then she remembers she has to be the loving wife, so she goes over and she holds his hand. Y'all come back for part 7 when we go ahead and wrap it up. Peace.